Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. This is Hunter from Astrophotography with a little special video today as we got a little bit of something in the mail and it looks something like this. Yeah, it is a planetary camera that was sent to me from ZWO to try out and see how much of a difference between these new generation planetary cameras work with some of the old ones. So the test we are going to be doing in this series, we're going to be trying out Old Faithful, which is the ASI174mm that I own, with a much newer version of it. This is the ZWO ASI678mm. We're going to see with a showdown of which camera performs better, Old Faithful of 174 or this brand new one here. Now, I haven't even taken it out of the box as of yet, so this is actually the first time I am going to be opening this in general. So let's go ahead and see what we have inside here. So we of course have the camera in itself, very similar. I mean, all of these cameras kind of look exactly the same for the planetary camera wise, and it looks like it does come with the fisheye lens. It must be a standard for planetary cameras this day, and you can see from the title here is the ASI 678mm with that fisheye lens. So also in here we have just a regular 1.25 inch eyepiece adapter, so you can use it inside of a regular focuser. Also comes with a brand new USB 3 cable here, the new generation red one. And we also have the ST4 cable, and basically with these, you just throw them out at this point. And then of course we do have a little bit of a cover for this, for the front of the lens. So I just want to give a little bit disclaimer out. ZWO did send me this camera here to try out. Now, at the end of the time period here, I get to either want to buy the camera itself or send it back for this review in general. So we got a little bit of some time to really start checking out this camera here, and I'm very curious because I had a choice between a bunch of the brand new color cameras itself, but I wanted to do the idea of the Old Faithful 174mm, that is the basic standard for hydrogen alpha solar photography, and try it out with one of these newer monochrome versions. And we're going to do several tests for this. We're going to be doing images of the sun in comparison with the two. Also going to be doing a little bit of some lunar activity as well to see how well this performs with taking beautiful images of the moon and its craters. Going to do a little bit of some planetary stuff too, since Saturn is now coming up a little bit earlier, and hopefully on the 20th I'll be able to do a nice test to show the moon and Saturn very close together in the same field of view. So let's go ahead and start capturing a little bit of data between these two cameras. Alright, before we really start diving into doing some tests, we should really see the comparison specs for both of these cameras in general. On the left here, I have the 174 mono, and on the right here, I have the 678. First off, you're looking at $499 for the mono version for the 174, and $349 for the 678. So there is a difference of about $120 in regards to price. When we start going down, here is the different specs between the two cameras in itself. We're going to start over with the 174. You're looking at a 1 by 1.2 inch sensor with a resolution of about 1936 by 1216 with an ADC of about 12 bits, read noise at about 3.5, full well at about 32 KE, with a quantum efficiency of about 77%. It is a USB 3 camera with a frame rate of 164 and we're looking at a pixel size of about 5.86 micrometers. Pretty large pixel size. When we're going over to the 678, we're looking at a 1 by 1.8 inch sensor, which is a little bit smaller, but you're getting a bigger resolution though, a 3840 by 2160, which is a 4K resolution. We're looking at the same ADC of about 12 bits, and the pixel size, much different, much smaller pixels at 2 micrometers in regards to the 174 at 586. The read noise is significantly less at 0.6. Looking at a full well of 11.2E, which is more than about 3 times less than what you get out of the 174. The quantum efficiency is a little bit higher at about 83, but you're looking at a frame rate of about 47.5. So definitely significant less with the frame rate rather than the 174. That may play a big role, especially when you're doing planetary stuff, because definitely the higher frame rate is a lot better, because you can take a bunch of frames very quickly and kind of mitigate, a little bit shifting in the track overall, as well as, you have better chances of capturing some nicer frames. But time will tell if that is the case. So with the 174, looks like your unity gain is at about 189, and that's when you start to look at the little bit of the better noise reduction. But with this one here, with the 678, you're looking at something that is very comparable for the near infrared spectrum, which is great for planetary, because with Jupiter and Saturn, it does emit infrared light. So that does help with a little bit of the overall clarity and picking up that nice detail for those planets. With the 678, uses the new Starvis 2 technology, which is great for much lower read noise and significantly enhances that near infrared spectrum. So that's some really cool stuff. Between the two, both have a 256 megabyte DDR3 bus. And when we're looking at some of the other comparisons too, this one doesn't have any amp glow, but I know with the 174, it does have a history of that horizontal banding that you would get with the camera. I've been seeing it myself when I've been using it, especially for doing solar, and as well as for using it when I am using the camera as a guide camera in general. And you have also a high conversion gain mode, which is very nice too, because when you have the gain at about 182, you significantly drop the read noise overall, which is very good. We like lower noise with our images in general. When we're comparing these other graphs as well, when looking at, the color version or with the overall mono version, you can see that it's a lot more sensitive in that near infrared spectrum, unlike with the 174, which really cuts those down. So we're looking at a much higher response between these two. And in general, everything's all the same of how you connect the cameras itself together. Here's some reference images on the left of the planet Jupiter and the moon. And when we're looking at here with the 678, there is no example images, but we are definitely going to be doing that here. First off, we're going to be looking at the hydrogen alpha test here with round 1. Alright, round 1 is officially started between the matchup of the ASI678 mono versus the 174 mono. In the first round, we're going to be doing hydrogen alpha imaging with a Lunt double stacked telescope. We're going to pick a region on the sun to image from both of these cameras, and we're going to see which one is better. So the rules for this test are going to be very simple. We're just going to be using each one of these cameras along with Sharp Cap, that we're going to be recording the same area of the sun using the same tuning, everything else, same software to stack, and then we're going to see which produces a much more detailed image, the 678 or the old trusty 174. And the first one up to the plate is going to be the ASI678 mono, and see how this one performs. So here is the first look with the 678. Now, as a clarification, I am dealing with wildfire smoke across the region, so of course the viewing is not going to be as great, unfortunately, compared to anything else, but this is going to be the best as I can get. I didn't do any flats or anything. I'm just doing it kind of just straight out of the box of what is possible with this. We do have a little bit of some wind, and I'm doing some slight adjustments with the overall histogram to kind of get it to somewhere I like it, somewhere around there. And we're just going to do a quick 3,000 frames for this image right here. It is at the point where it's sharpest as possible. So we're going to do a comparison there in the same area. For my lunt, I cannot fit the entire disc with this one, but with my 174, I can when I've done images in the past of the sun. So there is at least a little bit of a advantage here to the 174 to be able to get a full disc with a 60, but we'll see what happens when we actually zoom into some of these regions, especially this one very large sunspot region there in the center. Then we can do that nice comparison with. So waiting for that to go through and get its image, and then we can go ahead and switch over to the 174 so we can do a comparison of the live view. Alright, so we're taking the 678 out here, and we're going to replace it with the 174. Now, I should probably have a little bit of a disclaimer. With both of these cameras here, I did use a ZWO infrared cut filter, which you really should be using anyway when you're doing video of hydrogen alpha, because the sun does emit infrared and it causes some issues with some of these cameras. So switching that right in there, and then I'll see you back inside. Alright, now here's the view with the 174, and you can definitely tell the field of view difference between the 678 and this, where I can actually fit the entire disc with the 174, which is kind of nice, especially when you're using a hydrogen alpha. But if you're trying to get up really close to sunspot regions, definitely the 678 is going to be your go-to. Or if you happen to be using a Daystar Quark, you're going to get some nice results there, especially with that 4K resolution. But we're cutting it in half here, and we're still getting the entire disc. Now, there is some weird anomalies on here. Like I mentioned, I didn't do any flats for this, and this shows up a lot more for whatever reason with my 174 than it does with that 678. So we're going to do the same thing, where I have adjusted the overall histogram, and we're going to do 3,000 frames for this one as well. And as that's going through, now I have been using the 174 for pretty much everything, and I've got some pretty decent results over it. Granted, I'm not the greatest when it comes to doing solar photography. I think that my lunt has some issues that are dealing with, but this is a good example, just kind of right off the bat, of what the difference is between these two cameras, especially when it comes to the frame rate. As you see, this one is right now shooting at 124, whereas the 678 was shooting at about 48 frames per second. So let's go ahead, and now since we have both of these images, let's go ahead and stack them together to see which one looks better. Alright, now that we're back at the computer, we have stacked both of the data sets for hydrogen alpha regarding the 678 and the 174. I've already gone through a little bit of some processing using the Solar Toolbox that is available as a extra plugin for PixInsight. And here is the results here. We're going to first start off with the 174. And we can see here, we got a much larger field of view. There is a little bit of some weird artifacts here at the top. Like I said, this was just a very, quick and dirty kind of a stack.
of 3,000 frames, but when we're looking at this with the 174 with my LUT 60, I can actually get the entire disc, which is pretty cool. And then when we're zooming into the sunspot regions here, not too terribly bad. I mean, we can see some of that little bit intricate wavy detail of the magnetic coils. All in all, not too bad of an image. And when we're looking at some of the edges, we can see the solar prominences there on the sides. And then once we go over towards the other side, you can see another solar prominence through here. So all in all, this is performed not too terribly bad. I've had some decent results with the 174 in general. I just think that there is a couple of issues with my LUT that needs to be addressed further on down the line. If I had a newer version of the LUT, where this one is more than 10 years old, and maybe I had a DSLR Quark, we could probably get some much better results. So this is with the 174 when it is processed. So now let's go over to the 678. Now, we do not get the entire disc, unfortunately, but one thing I definitely noticed, you get a lot more individual detail on the sun's surface. Now, it is flipped from the other direction from the 174, but looking at everything, I see a lot more detail in with this too. Like, the prominences look really good. The sunspot looks really good too, and I haven't even really done a lot of sharpening to this. I can probably sharpen this even more with like the unsharpened mask, especially in this area here, without introducing a lot of noise, but put it just like that, and we got a pretty solid image here. So I took it even a step further because I was very interested in the 678. If I used a little bit of a Barlow lens, this is what happens here. Now we have very good detail. This is 2,000 frames that I stacked at 10%. And look at the detail on this. I don't know, 174, even though you can give me a full field of view, this detail is definitely much better than the 174. And I really think it has to come down to, one, much higher resolution. We're going from a 4K resolution of this camera to the 174 being about half of that. But I think the biggest thing is the pixel sizes, since the 678 only has a 2 micrometer pixel size, while the 174 has a 5.86. That's a huge difference. So you're seeing a lot more smaller pixels per image, and you can pick up a lot more detail that way. So I have to say, for this first round, 678 takes it, especially when it comes to the intricate detail. If you're doing close-ups on sunspots, this camera is fantastic for it, especially if you pack it with a Barlow. Make sure you have good seeing conditions too, and not dealing with the smoke like I have been for the past couple of months thanks to the Canadian wildfires. 174 is really good too, but you're also getting a much larger image. So if you're doing a full disc, 174 should be really good for you. But if you want really crisp detail close up on like sunspots or really close ups of prominences, 678 has definitely got your back for that. So definitely in this test, in the first round, 678 mono is the clear winner. Alright, so that round one is completed, with the clear winner being the 678 camera. Now we're going to take it to round two, and that's going to be looking at some lunar features. So with this setup, I'm going to be using probably one of the smallest but most focal length telescopes that I have, the Orion Apex 102. It is a Mac Cassegrain with a focal length of about 1,300 millimeters with a focal ratio of 12.7. Can't get any slower than that, that's for sure. But this is going to be a real good example because I really want to get really close
into those craters as possible, and I'm even going to throw a Barlow into the mix too to really push the limits of what can be seen with between these two planetary cameras. So once we get the moon in view tonight, we're going to do the same test as well, taking both cameras, taking a series of 3,000 frames and then stacking them together, processing them, and compare the both. So let's get it on with round 2. And to switch things up first, we are going to be using the 174 this time around since it lost in the first round, and then we'll go ahead and switch to the other one. I got the Barlow already in place. The moon is getting ready to come out from the back of this one tree, and we're going to head right back inside to get a live view of what we can see with this camera.
Alright, now we're back at the computer. We are with the 174. There's 2 areas of interest I want to do the test on. This is one of them here, so we're going to do a quick 2,000 frames and see what we come up with, and then we'll move to the other portion and we'll do the same test for that as well. So I'm going to do a nice quick capture of this region and let it capture at about 111 frames per second. You notice there is a little bit of some horizontal banding. That is a normal thing for the 174. It is a common thing with this camera, but you're able to mitigate that pretty easily in general. We'll do another round of 2,000 just in case it doesn't happen to stack up correctly. Can't hurt doing more than what you bargained for. And then we'll move to the other region a little bit further up towards the top of the moon. So we're going to let that complete. There we go. Now we're going to move our telescope over towards the top of the moon. Lots of incredible detail with this one in general. So heading all the way up to the top. Beautiful region here. Go ahead and auto adjust the histogram. Everything looks good. We'll go ahead and quick capture 2,000 frames. Do have a little bit of a dust speck here and a dust speck there. We can get rid of that in post-processing. Luckily with the 174, it is very quick for the frames to come through. And then we'll capture another 2,000. And there we go. We have our set for the 174. Let's go ahead and switch over to the 678. Alright, now that I switched over to the 678, this is our field of view, and oh my goodness, it is definitely a lot closer to the surface, and look at the detail. This is astonishing. Add a little bit of some contrast to it, something like that. Let's go ahead and capture this region here, 2,000 frames, and then we'll move to the other one that's down at the bottom of the moon before this hits the meridian. Now we are capturing frames at half the rate at about 40 FPS. Actually, scratch that, we're talking about 3 times as slower, but we're gonna see which one produces a lot more detail overall. Is it going to be the 174 or the 678? So I'm going to run 2 sets of this so we can stack them together. Okay, so I got 2 sets of those. Let's go ahead and move down to our secondary region. We're just also going to appreciate how close up we can get with this camera, because my goodness, with this 2.5 Barlow, this is absurd close detail. Now there is something, notice I had to do a flat for this because there's this weird anomaly that keeps popping up down at the bottom of the camera. I'm not exactly sure what that's from. I don't know if there's something like a hair that's on the lens and I just don't know it, but it is very annoying and I had to get rid of it by doing a flat. Go ahead and get our histogram back to normal. Well, it took me a moment to find it, but we have it now. I'm gonna go ahead and make some slight adjustments to the overall exposure. And let's go ahead and start capturing 2,000 frames, 2 of them, for this one. Alright, both are now taken. We're going to go ahead and stack them, and I will see you in PixInsight. Alright, we are back at the computer with the stacked lunar images. So let's go ahead and first look at the 174mm. And this is one of the pictures right here where I took the northern portions of the moon in itself. If we can zoom in. Not too bad of detail, I must say. Got some nice crater action through there. It is a little bit soft though, at least from my screen. It probably looks not as soft when you're looking at it through YouTube compression. All in all, looks pretty darn good overall with this. So that's for that region. Let's go ahead and check the southern region. This region actually turns out to be my favorite for sure. This is a really good image of this really cool mountain range that runs through there, and then this big open crater. I forget the actual name of it in general, but we got some pretty decent detail with the 174 with the Barlow. So there's that test. So how does that compare to the 678? So we're going to first start off with the top. A lot more zoomed in, and I mean a lot more zoomed in, and my gosh, the detail on this blows me away. This is fantastic. Probably one of the best moonshots I've probably taken so far in this career of mine. So basically, since I've been taking photos of the moon, this is ridiculous of how good detail this is. You can actually, almost looks three-dimensional from this perspective. And you can see the really deep ridging inside of the craters here. And we're talking about like at least 2,600 millimeter focal length with that Barlow. So that's that image. So looking at the other one, we're going to full screen it. And I mean, this is incredible in itself. I mean, both images performed pretty darn good. But if I had to compare these two right here together, side by side. So let's get them so they're the same size. For this region, I'm going to have to zoom in a little bit on the 174. So looking at the differences between here, I can definitely tell with the 678 on the right, there is definitely a lot more detail along this mountain range here compared to the one on the left, which seems a little bit soft. Especially inside of these craters, they're a lot more sharp. Now these were only taken minutes after each other. So this isn't a different night. This is literally within minutes of each other, and the vast differences I'm seeing. Granted, you get a little bit of a wider field of view with the 174, but if you really want to get up close, the 678 really does an exceptional job, especially in this crater right here. So when we're looking at the 174, it looks kind of blurry. When you look at it from the 678, you can actually see the little mountain portion in the middle there. And then when you're looking at these crater features here, definitely have a lot more contrast and sharpness to it. Compare the other two here, the ones at the top of the moon. Kind of hard to do a comparison when they're literally right near each other, so let's do this. 174 is on the left, and the 678 is on the right. And looking at these, especially from my eyes, 678 has much better detail, Probably because, once again, the small pixels are working in its favor, especially when we're looking at this portion right here in comparison to the other one, which is on the other side, which I'll have to flip it. I'll go ahead and mirror it. When we're looking at that region, which one to you looks better, more crisp? The one on the right. So again, in round 2, ASI678 is the winner. Now to round 3.
Alright, now we are into round 3, and tonight is a little bit of a special one because Saturn is right next to the moon tonight. So it'll be really easy to find Saturn. We're going to compare both the 678 and the 174 of doing planetary, especially when it comes to Saturn, but we're also going to be adding a little bit of a bonus with the Sea Star to see if we can capture the conjunction together, because the telescope that I'm using tonight will not capture both in the same field of view, unfortunately. But with the Sea Star, we'll be able to as well, but the main focus is going to be planetary-wise. So, and the first one up is going to be the 678 mono. Alright, so we got Saturn in the field of view right now with the 678. We're going to do some minor adjustments here so we can get this thing kind of right near the center. It looks like we're in pretty decent focus right now. And we're going to do just a series of about 2,000 frames. I'm probably going to take a couple of them just to make sure we get the clearest picture possible. So let's go ahead and start getting a little bit of that data. Now, the seeing conditions in general tonight is not the greatest because in order to capture, both of these targets together, since they're very close in conjunction, it is only about 20 degrees above the horizon here, especially when it's at the midpoint, when it's directly above the moon itself. So that's what we are going to be working with. We're going to do some cropping as well. I'm going to do a series of 2,000 frames and then a little bit of some 1,000 as well. Make sure we don't really have any drift going on. Alright, I think we captured enough frames with the 678. Let's go ahead and switch over to the 174 since we have it in the field of view. So let's go ahead and do that as of now. Pop this right off here. Unplug it. Grab the 174. Plug it right on in. That is not too terribly bad. So now let's go ahead and start taking captures with the 174 and compare the both of them when we get done. Well, we got all the captures that we need. Now let's go ahead and stack our frames and see which one performed better. But looking at the early signs, at least from the computer aspect, I think the 174 actually prevailed this time around, unlike the 678, but time will tell once we are on the computer.
Alright, so we have stacked the data. We did a little bit of some processing between the two images of Saturn. The first one we're going to look at is the 678. When we're zooming in, I mean, it's not too terribly bad. The seeing wasn't really that great for the most part. Also was only at about 20 degrees above the horizon, but with the 678 didn't do half bad. We got a little bit of some banding details here. You can't see the Cassian division, unfortunately, just because that the rings are basically right at the parallel to the disc itself from our vantage point. So unfortunately we do not get to see that at all, but not too bad of an image in general. Now, when we look at the 174 performed a little bit better, and I think it had to do with a little bit larger pixels because of this. Because I actually see a little bit of the banding features a little bit stronger, especially through here and right here. The color's a little bit better too once I was able to really start processing it together. But definitely both performed about the same, I would say. Just 174 was a little bit better, at least in this example. So for this one, 174, I say, is the winner for this one. So after completing the 3 tests that I wanted to do between having the 678 versus the 174, which one is the clear winner? Well, both cameras are quite nice, as a matter of fact. One, I've had a little bit better results with the 678, at least with my setup in general. I don't really have too much in a way of super long focal length telescopes of anything greater than 1300, especially that's what you need for doing a lot of planetary stuff. But I think it helped a lot for me because with the smaller pixel sizes, they're able to get a little bit more clear detail, especially with the moon and with the hydrogen alpha test. Unlike with this one here, the 174, you really get that super fast frame rate, which it took a little bit longer with the 678 to kind of get the amount of frames that I wanted to. But this also performed very well with the moon. And this one, between the both of them, compared the same when I was taking photos of Saturn. Granted, not the best planetary photographer by all means, but it was definitely a nice little learning curve in general. So definitely both of them wonderful cameras that you can buy through ZWO. But if I had to choose which one I would probably want, I think it would be the 678, at least for my setup in general, because it is a little bit lesser in price. You're saving about another $120 to $50, just depending on where you're looking at. But of course, you know, this is the legendary camera in general, especially if you're looking at the really long focal length. The larger pixels are going to be definitely helpful for that, and especially that very fast frame rate will really help you get those frames super quickly and be really nice for those time lapses. So those are my overall thoughts between the two cameras. So you can buy both of these cameras. I'll leave links down below, some affiliate links. You know, doesn't really cost you anything to, you know, purchase through those links. It just helps me out a little bit. I get a little bit of a commission from that. And I hope this video helped you enough to decide, you know, if you wanted to go into the monochrome planetary camera field, that these two cameras are very good choices in general. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. I love doing reviews like this, especially with the new technology that keeps coming out. Hope you have some clear skies and a nice, wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers.